Okay, so good morning or good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome to this masterclass on the Partners in Innovation Fellowship Programme. Delighted to have all our partners across the sector with us today that are sharing, going to share insights and expertise in relation to the themes around the Partners in Innovation Fellowship Programme. Just to introduce myself, my name is Karina Ginty. I'm from ATU. And I'm leading the NTUTOR project for ATU, and I'm a stream lead for stream 1 of the student stream in NTUTOR, and I'm here with my co-partner and colleague who is leading stream 1 for the sector, Moira Maguire. And Moira, you might wave your hand or you can say hello so they know who you are. Moira Maguire. Everybody. Moira Maguire is Head of Teaching and Learning in IADT, or sorry, Dundalk IT, apologies. So we're going to take you through this this session for the next hour, and we're going to introduce you to the panel members, and it's wonderful to have student leadership representation across the sector with us also for this session. So maybe just to begin, we will talk through the agenda and the plan for the next 60 minutes. And I have a few slides, just to check those slides are sharing. Sean, are they?
Yeah.
Yep. Great. Okay, so I'll just move on to that. Okay, so just to remind everybody, for some, you may have just heard about NTUTOR. It is a national TU sector project. It is all about transformation for recovery and resilience. It comes under NORP and under Next Generation EU funding. It is funded through Europe, and it is a fund of 37 million euro for the sector, and it's broken down into various different work packages. Today we're just going to be talking about one initiative and one work package which involves students as partners, and that's why you're all here today, to learn more about the approaches on this. Our plan today or over the next hour is we're going to give you a quick walkthrough on the application form and the application process. Maura is going to share that in a few moments. Just to introduce our panel, our expert panel that's with us over the next hour, we have Dr. Mark Kelly, who is a lead on education for sustainability in ATU. We have Dr. Fiona O'Riordan, who is a lead in the sector in the area of academic integrity and assessment. Delighted to have Fiona here from DCU. And we have Dr. Garage O'Sullivan, who is the MTU lead in the area of technology enhanced learning, and he is going to talk about digital transformation in teaching and learning. And then we also have Dr. Claire McGing, who's here from IADT, and again she plays a national role in the area of EDI development. So great to have Claire with us. Then we also have Maureen Harron. Maureen is from ATU here, and she's a leader in the area of universal design for learning here in the college. And also we have our own Dr. Sharon Flynn, who is our national coordinator for NTUTOR, working with TIA. So she's going to share her experiences of student partnership success on a recent project, a sectoral project called the EDTL project. We also have some student leaders, student leadership figures from the sector. We have Clodagh McGivern, who's the VP for Academic Affairs from USI. Great to have you with us, Clodagh. And also we have a student union president from IADT, Owen Hicks-Smith. And both Clodagh and Owen will share with us the whole area about student partnership and why we're doing this. And we have some great panel webinar moderators with us, colleagues from the NTUTOR project, Dr. Nuala Harding from TUS and Ken McCarthy from SETU. So they will be moderating a lot of the chat and the questions and making sure that all your questions are answered today between all of us and the panel members. So we'll conclude the session today with looking at some EDI monitoring and the piece around that and why this is a requirement at the very end of your application to complete and the assessment rubric. So without any delay, I think we'll move on, and we will just share with you the application form. I'm going to stop sharing here, and Moira is going to just do a quick walkthrough on the application form. So thanks very much, Moira.
Can everybody see the NTUTOR website there?
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. So you can access all the information about this fellowship scheme on the NTUTOR page here on the THEA website. And everybody will have also been sent this information locally within your institutions. So often institutions will have a repository for this information as well. So it's likely to be available locally also. So you see there's our frequently asked questions are here. You've obviously done this bit already. And you can access the application form here. So just by clicking here, you access the application form. So you see the form is powered through MS Forms, and you can see the information and the details are here. The closing date is the 30th of January 2023. So you'll see when you go in the first page, you see 3 questions, and then you see this submit. And I know some people have been a little bit nervous and been worried that suddenly you're submitting too early or you've missed a bit of the page. That's not the case at all. So first of all, we click the consent. I'm going to click my own institution here. And first of all, I'm going to go in as a student. So this submit shows because the form branches. So if I'm a student making an individual application, I click student. And then I answer the rest of these questions. So the stage in my studies, my name, my email address, whether I'm full-time or part-time, whether I'm a mature student, how I describe my gender. Now, these are the key questions in terms of the assessment of the application. The motivation, why you're interested, what you'd like to get from it, and what you would like to contribute to it. Drawing on your own experience as a learner so far, what do you think are the key small changes that could enhance the student experience? And then the themes that interest you the most, and you can choose more than one. Sorry, which of the themes? Sorry, you choose one, and then why are you particularly interested, and why do you think it's important? And that might be with respect to your institution, or with respect to your discipline. It could be either. And then, do you need any additional support to help you engage with the project, and any other information that you feel is relevant? So then that is submitted then. Now, if, however, you are a member of staff, the form is different. So again, I'm just choosing my own institution. So choose the institution that you belong to. So if the application is from a member of staff, the member of staff is going to have a more detailed project proposal and a project group that includes students and staff members. So in this case, we'll be looking for the proposal title, the name of the leader and the lead contact details, and this is the person that we'll be communicating with, the number of students in the team, the number of staff in the team. And again, we're asking people to enter digits just so it's easier for us to collate that information. We're committed to EDI monitoring of a lot of the work packages. So we're also committed to gender balance. So we'd like to see the gender breakdown for the team. So just indicate broadly the gender breakdown of the team in words there. And Claire will be talking again about that later. These proposals will be proposed with reference to a specific change or enhancement that's going to be made. So typically this might happen at the level of a program, the level of a module, might be at the level of a service or some kind of process, or process might be, say, something like induction, that will benefit from this award. So for example, if a lecturer is partnering with students to introduce elements of UDL into a strand of a program or the assessment of a module, you would name the specific module or the specific area of a program. Let's say, for example, the laboratory components of a program. So just be specific about what area is going to benefit. Which theme does your proposal best align with? Then there is an outline of project deliverables. So what the assessors want to see is just the key outcomes. So that would be the changes or benefits that are anticipated. And these should be linked to the themes and to the context of the project. So it might be, again, might be in the context of a module, or, you know, it may be in the context of a process or an approach, such as maybe academic writing within the context of a program. So the context is important there. A short description of the project is the next thing that's required, and that would include the aims, the structure, the timescale and key activities. But again, this is really very brief. What is important is the approach to student partnership that will be taken. So again, we recommend that you draw on the, you know, the information that's available, particularly through NSTEP, that, for example, the steps to partnership, to come up with an approach to partnership, to think through how you're going to approach this partnership and explain how the principles of student engagement are going to inform this work. And the partnerships should be as inclusive as possible. So it's important to think through any barriers to partnership for students and to think through how this partnership is going to be inclusive. So what steps are taken to promote inclusive opportunities? So consider some of the potential barriers. So a key barrier might be who's asked, who gets the opportunity to participate. There's barriers in terms of participation, such as time or where the participation happens, or are there any costs. So think about the potential barriers and take some steps to enhance inclusiveness. And again, that needs to be outlined there. A brief proposed budget. I mean, we're talking about 5,000 is the amount of money, so it's not a huge amount of money, but an outline of what it will be spent on. And then details of the anticipated impact on the student learning experience or teaching enhancement. So again, you're looking at that change or benefit that's previously been identified and looking at what success means and briefly indicating how that will be sustained. And then again, this is just approximately how many students are going to benefit. It's important in terms of the project for us to have a handle on the wider impact. So students will be involved as partners in these projects, but the work will also benefit many more students through the changes and enhancements that are made. So for example, if a fellowship looks at UDL within the context of a particular kind of assessment or module, roughly how many students will benefit from that change made. If 50 students will take that module, the next, you know, the next time it runs, that's 50 students. Or if it's all students on a program, that could be 200 students, 300, whatever it is, it's the approximate number. So those are those questions there. So I'm just going to stop sharing.
That's great. Thank you, Moira. I just saw a really good comment come in, question in the chat. Is it possible that we could have a Word or a PDF format of the application form? So we will make that available through the PIA NTUTOR site if for people who want to prepare it in advance and then transfer it over onto the online application system. So that'll be possible. So thank you. Was there anything else, Ken and Nuala, you wanted to raise that has come up? We might have missed. I just saw that one.
That was the key one that I was going to raise with you, Karina. Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Brilliant.
There is one question in there from a Davy Walsh asking, could the project align to Green Campus initiatives rather than a modular program? I think it possibly could. It doesn't have to be tied to a modular program. Absolutely.
It could be involved with or align with strategic initiatives happening within your own university or institute of technology. Absolutely. Okay, so I think we'll move on to the next part. Okay, so we're going to, thanks very much, Maura, for walking through that detail. And we're going to move on now to the panel discussion. And our first speaker is Dr. Mark Kelly, who's going to give us an insight into the possibilities around the education for sustainability theme. So thanks, Mark. I'll hand over to you.
Great, thanks, Karina, and it's great to see everybody. Great to see the level of interest. It's fantastic. I suppose I'm the head of the ATU Galway Mayo Centre for Sustainability, and what I'm going to do actually is just call out a couple of short definitions and then highlight sort of keywords from that, and then maybe give people some ideas. But I'm reticent about stifling anybody's creativity or innovation that they might have around this, so it's fairly free flowing and open, but something just to frame the ideas that you may have. So there is a national strategy for education for sustainable development. The second iteration of it was released during the summer, and within that they have a number of definitions, and one of the definitions is that ESD, which is the acronym for it, empowers learner with knowledge, skills, values and attitudes. So when you look at the word competency, I suppose it can encompass all of those things: to take informed decisions and make responsible actions for environmental integrity, economic viability and a just society, empowering people of all genders for present and future generations while respecting cultural diversity. So there's a lot in that, But what I would say, if you want to extract something out of it, is that empowerment piece. And that's, relates to what Karina and Moira have just spoken about, is the idea of, authentic collaboration between staff and students, and to allow students the space to take a leadership on something that's really important to them, especially if it's related to sustainability. The other caveat to that sort of definition is that they identify that it's a lifelong learning process. And when we're looking at sort of what you might produce out of the projects, to think of that, how can those resources be used maybe in the future, or how can an approach be used in the future, or how can an activity be used in the future? The other thing I want to highlight is a recent document that came out at a European level called GreenCom, which is the European Sustainability Competency Framework, which I'll put a link into the chat when I stop speaking in a minute. But the idea of this is to foster a sustainability mindset by helping users develop the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to think, plan, and act with empathy, responsibility, and care for the planet. So that really puts a focus on hands-on, engaging, and action-based ways of learning. So, pragmatic, action-based learning, if at all possible. You can think of things like outdoor education. You can think of things, engagement with different groups, when you're looking at critical understanding, practical skills, all that sort of stuff. So with the fellowship scheme, it is focused on collaboration between the staff and students and the development of personal and professional skills. And from an ESD perspective, we would like the scheme to actually just create enjoyable and memorable learning experiences for both staff and students, and maybe to create learning resources, artifacts, and approaches that can be utilized for future modules and future programs. And as Davey mentioned in the chat, like, this isn't just aligned to modules. It can link into Green Campus programs, student societies, taking a living labs approach with the building and estates offices, engaging with our own Centre for Sustainability, research groups, community groups, schools. The possibilities are endless, but it's all about translating these ideas into a fun learning experience at whatever scale you think is manageable within the busy academic year. And that's for students and staff. Like, there is a tendency often in these sort of proposals to be super ambitious. What I would say is, what would be a really enjoyable thing to do from a sustainability point of view? And, do we have the time to do it? So I think I'll leave it at that, Karina, if that's okay. And if people have questions toward the end, they can.
Yeah, lovely, Mark. You made some lovely statements there. And maybe if you want to add any links to the chat that might help, for some, they might be new to SDGs or some of the definitions around education for sustainability. And by all means, if you want to add anything into the chat. But a key point you've made there about translating into fun learning experiences, and that's a good aim to focus on. So thanks very much, Mark. And we'll move on to our next panel presenter. Unless, let me just check actually, was there any particular questions related to Mark there, Nuala and Ken, that we can address? Sorry, I'm just double checking.
Yeah, there are some questions in, not necessarily related to the topic Mark was covering. There are things around funding restrictions, but Moira has added the link there to explain how funding can, be used. There was one question from a student: do they have to have 3 members identified who are making their application? So that's one just maybe to consider there.
Yeah, and I see Moira has answered that.
Yeah, so there's just a couple of those.
Students can apply as individuals, though. I suppose that's the important thing. As a student, you don't need to identify partners. If you're applying as a student, simply apply. You'll be paired with partners and with a staff partner. So just make the individual application. But the minimum team will be 2 students and 1 member of staff, and they can be that's the absolute minimum, but they can obviously be larger than this.
There's one question about how staff can give expressions of interest if they're not part of a project proposal but would like to partner with students. So maybe that's something, if they want to be involved in a project but they're not putting in a proposal.
Well, what I would suggest there is that they make contact with their own institutional lead, the NTUTOR institutional lead of their university or Institute of Technology, and note that expression of interest to partner or to be a mentor to the particular students. Okay. Anything else? Nothing else in relation to education for sustainability. We'll move on and we can come back on this again. So keep engaging with the chat. That's fantastic. Lots of really good questions coming through. So next up we have our next panel member is Dr. Fiona O'Riordan, and Fiona is going to give us a flavour of academic integrity and assessment and the initiatives or possibilities around this topic. So thanks, Fiona.
Thank you very much, Karina and Moira, for inviting me to this. And I wish you much success with this exciting and very valuable project. I mean, it's really brilliant. It's a real example of student partnership. So well done. Thanks for inviting me to contribute. So you've asked me to speak a little bit about promoting academic integrity. And I just wanted to say at the outset, academic integrity is not elusive. It's not complicated. But we do need to remember there's no one single silver bullet that will provide the full solution, which is why this project is really exciting. You can be a part of that solution. Promoting academic integrity is multi-pronged, and it requires ongoing commitment from all of us in the institution or university to uphold academic integrity. And really to kind of remind ourselves that if we don't collectively commit to upholding academic integrity, the reputational damage for all of us is unimaginable. I mean, our credibility as professionals, as academics, as students, graduates, researchers will be seriously diminished if our reputation is damaged. So upholding academic integrity is core to all of us, I think, and all of our responsibility. And a culture of integrity is required across all of our institutions in terms of all their business. It should be at the heart of everything they do. It should be part of their DNA and not simply confined to student assessment. So it's lovely to hear the education for sustainability. We tend to always think of academic integrity, not always, we often tend to think of academic integrity in terms of assessment, but it's integrity in all the university's business, in all their day-to-day business. And they in university need to show and be transparent about how they're behaving with integrity towards all their stakeholders. So if we believe that upholding academic integrity requires a culture of integrity that we all share, then this fellowship offers us a broad spectrum of possibilities to enhance and promote academic integrity in a shared way across our university. So just very quickly, I'd like to share some initiatives that we have had great success with in DCU, and they might stimulate some ideas for projects that you might like to submit under this call. And the three initiatives I'm going to share with you very briefly are interactive oral assessment, challenge-based learning, and students as partners in assessment. And I'll put links to all of these initiatives in the chat as soon as I've finished. So interactive oral assessment is innovative in that it is a two-way conversation using a work-based or professional scenario to stimulate a free-flowing conversation or discussion between the student and the academic. It's designed to be a curious type of conversation, so it's not a typical kind of oral exam where the academic who's in role uses prompts or genuine natural questions to allow the students to showcase their learning. So it's all about prompting and questioning the students within a scenario to allow the student every opportunity to showcase their learning. And every scenario will be slightly different depending on how the student approaches it. So it facilitates the exploration of students' deep and higher order understanding of the topic. It's different from an oral exam or a viva where a question and answer format is used, and that can be often very stressful. So very much the student and the academic are partners in this conversation. They're also, and I won't go into it now, you'll see it in some of the material I share with you, the partners in designing the assessment, in using the rubric and informing the rubric, and then in testing the rubric against example interactive orals. So it's a really good way to promote academic integrity because the students and staff member have to prepare in advance to be ready for this free-flowing conversation. Moving on then, because I'm conscious of time, challenge-based learning is something we're really enjoying in DCU, and we're part of a European project on it as well. And it's really a process of student collaborative engagement with their peers, with academics, with external stakeholders and researchers to develop solutions to real-world social, technological, environmental or economic challenges of urgency and significance. So they're very real, they're very current, and they're challenges that society or industry have not managed to solve yet, and they want our input from the university or the institution. It's very much learner driven, and students, with the support of their academic, define the dimensions of the challenge to be worked on. So rather like a research question, define it so it's workable and reasonable in the time they have. And throughout the process, the students acquire the necessary skills through masterclasses, interventions from different stakeholders. It's very authentic because the students spend their time collaborating with the academics, researchers, industry to try and solve the solution, because it's to solve the problem or the challenge, because it's in everybody's interest that a good solution has been found for society or industry, whoever it is. And then finally, in partnership with students and academics, DCU developed a resource called Students as Partners in Assessment. And this really is just a simple continuum that allowed students and academics to see along the continuum what kind of assessment partnerships might work in their context. So for early to higher education students, maybe first year, they might like a kind of a low-level partnership. So it might be something around negotiating an assignment brief or having choice in their assignment or negotiating submission dates, right up to high-level partnerships, which might be somewhat of self-assessment and peer assessment. And on the flip side of the resource, and students helped us design this. So on the flip side of the resource, there's advice to students from students on how to embrace partnership opportunities in assessment with their academics. So I'll leave it there at the minute, and they're just some ideas to trigger or add to your own preparation for the application, and I'll add the links into the chat now. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Fiona. So there was 3 areas: interactive oral assessment, challenge-based learning, and student as partners in assessment. So possibly 3 approaches that academic teams or student teams, academic and student teams can come together and perhaps work on some solutions around these ideas. So thanks, Fiona. There's lots of questions coming through. I'm going to keep going, and we're going to come back in a moment to just catch up with those questions because I'm conscious of the time. So our next speaker is Dr. Garage O'Sullivan. So Garage, great to have you with us from NTU and a partner on the NTUTOR project. So Garage is going to talk about digital transformation in teaching and learning. So thanks, Garage.
That's great, Karina. Thanks very much. So yeah, I've been working at the intersection of learning and technology for a great many years now. I'm going to offer you a few thoughts and essentially walk you around this topic, if you like, and point out a few of the sites and features that might be of interest in terms of putting a proposal together. Now, ironically, I've been having some broadband issues, so do let me know if there's any video or image problems. I think to start with, maybe the most obvious trend in this area and something that features prominently in the NTUTOR proposal and in the project is the so-called great onlining that we're just coming out of. So that global and general move to online or remote modes of learning and teaching during the pandemic. So I suppose what happened then was often far from perfect, but it kept the show on the road, and maybe unlike previous developments in the whole area, it was something that everybody took part in. So maybe one question you might ask yourselves now as potential proposers of projects might be, how can we build on this kind of scale and on this kind of experience? Are there good practices that we'd like to keep on? Were there benefits that we'd like to see continued? Alternatively, maybe there was stuff that the great onlining, that the whole period of emergency remote teaching revealed about what we're lacking in terms of our current digital learning systems. So communication, for example, is often cited as having been an issue. How could that be improved? So that's one obvious way to think about projects under this digital theme. The continuity, or the consolidation, if you like, of the stuff that worked well during the emergency remote teaching period, or addressing the stuff that didn't. But then you have a whole bunch of other trends and other themes that people have been talking about since long before COVID came along. And some of those could also be considered, and I'll give you a quick run through them now, as alternative or complementary points of focus for your projects. So in no particular order, I think data, and specifically student data, and learning analytics is a very gettable and important area here. So, you know, again, what happened during the pandemic certainly only increased the interest and the activity there. This is about how we apply data analytics to data about students and student learning and the student journey. So, you know, you'll all be aware that your local virtual learning environment provides you with some basic data, but who sees it and could it communicate more? Could that data be aggregated with other data and with other data sources? Maybe students could be more empowered in terms of their access to their own data. Maybe students are equally worried about the privacy and data protection issues. So maybe there's a project there somewhere. Linked in my mind to the whole area of analytics would be the impact of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And obviously that's impacting on more than just digital learning. So AI for learning analytics potentially helps institutes make better use of the enormous amounts of data that they hold, and maybe it helps us move towards more predictive and even more prescriptive forms of analytics. But before leaving that topic, one of the big ways in which AI and machine learning are hitting teaching and learning right now is with something called ChatGPT. And look it up if you haven't heard of it. This is essentially a kind of an AI tool that uses natural language processing to respond to user-generated prompts. So basically, you can ask it a question or give it a prompt, and it replies using natural or everyday language. It can suggest ways to improve something you've already written, or maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but it can write your essays and reports for you as well. From a lecturer's point of view, it can maybe help answer student queries, provide student support, help prepare a lesson plan, and so on and so forth. So loads of challenges and opportunities there, loads of potential there. Another big trend close to my own heart is the area of game-based learning and gamification, maybe particularly interesting if you are a gamer. So game-based learning, basically stated, is putting learners inside some kind of a game, and they have to think from the inside out. They have to learn by doing things inside that world. There's potentially some AI in there as well, of course, but not necessarily. The game that gets developed could be high-tech and sophisticated and all singing, all dancing, but it could be relatively low-tech. It might be a text-based game, or maybe a game based around the use of a standard digital platform. Either way, maybe there is some aspect of a particular subject that you're engaged with as a student or a member of staff that you think could work well in that format. Another two things quickly. Sorry, Karina. Obviously, the kinds of immersive experiences that we can now have in today's high fidelity virtual reality environments, well, that's going to add a whole new dimension to game-based learning and to other things like simulation-based training, for example. And then augmented reality, or AR, that provides a whole bunch of other affordances as well in terms of adding a kind of an information layer on top of different kinds of physical environments. So perhaps there's something there of interest. And then mentioning VR and AR and thinking of the hardware involved, that reminds me to say finally that your project might focus in some hands-on way on classroom technology. So focusing on various different kinds of hardware or devices that could be used in the classroom to increase engagement or learning, or maybe increase the reach of the classroom itself. So I'm thinking here of purchasing things like whiteboard cameras, interactive screens, conferencing devices, maybe document cameras can be very flexible and very effective. Maybe you want to go another way and make an application to get money, to get funding, to buy tools to help produce media-rich digital learning content. So thinking there about maybe cameras or mics or lights or software, or maybe just a subscription to an image or video library, or maybe just a nice graphics tablet, maybe some training. So tons and tons of different things there. I'm going to leave it there, but happy to take some questions later. Thanks, Karina.
Thanks a million, Garrod. So I'm just thinking of the time. There's loads coming in the chat. So you might try and answer some of those questions coming in on the chat as well. But some great ideas. And I'm glad you brought up about the AI, the chatbot, and, you know, the impact it's going to have on higher education, but how we might look to work with these new technologies coming on board to transform teaching and learning and to support the learning efforts. So thanks a million, Garrod. So now I'm going to move on to Dr. Claire McGing. So Claire, thanks a million. You're going to tell us a little bit about equality, diversity and inclusion and what approaches we might take for that. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Karina. I live and breathe EDI every day of the week, so I'm going to try keep this very short. But I guess in thinking around EDI, or equality, diversity and inclusion in our institutions, they're often focused on kind of the 9 equality grounds in Irish equality legislation, but also around kind of access and widening participation strands as well. So I would say kind of think widely in the EDI space. And EDI, probably don't need to tell anyone here why it's important, but I guess kind of looking at it as a whole, in order for us to achieve excellence in our institutions, in order for us to be the best, we have to have the best. And we'll never be at our best when we don't have diversity and wide representation of groups. So I think it's a really important area at the moment in HEI, both strategically, but also morally as well. So I'm really thrilled that NTUTOR has a specific strand looking at EDI. I guess there are 5 I would say, very big sectoral issues in EDI at the moment that might give a bit of structure to your thinking. And then I'll talk to you about maybe some other ideas or other areas. The big one really is Athena Swan, the whole gender equality initiative in all of our institutions. And for the point of view of NTUTOR, often, and I've sat on lots of departmental level panels, for example, and a lot of the time when you drill down into the data, departmental or programme level, we often tend to see gendered issues arise. Programmes can be very skewed one way or the other. Traditionally, very high numbers of men in STEM programmes, for example, a high number of women in humanities and arts, for example. So that can raise particular challenges and issues in our classrooms, but also the whole area of gender in the curriculum itself and thinking beyond the binary and how that might happen. So I think gender, there's some good project ideas there. And then also thinking around intersectionality, how gender interacts with other aspects of identity to structure lived experience in the classroom. The second big initiative at the moment, and is going to get bigger, is the area of race equality. So again, working towards HEIs, academic departments, academic programmes becoming anti-racist in their approach, building race awareness, cultural diversity, etc., thinking around microaggressions and how we deal with them. But I guess most importantly, embedding race into the curriculum and embedding it in a very safe, kind of open way. Thirdly, traveller participation, the participation of Roma students in our institutions, and again, bringing that into the curriculum. These are issues that are not taught very often in our curriculum, and thinking about those issues, as well as supports for traveller students and Roma students, and encouraging them into higher ed. The fourth is the sexual violence framework prevention, or sexual violence and harassment framework. You probably know this as the consent framework. We've kind of shifted language recently. Again, I suppose the consent framework was student-led. It came from the ground up, and it's a really good example actually of what happens when students are encouraged and enabled to lead on initiatives. Consent workshops are being rolled out across the institution. We're training staff, and again, looking at how we might bring these issues into our academic programmes, create supports for students and so on. There might be some ideas there, and kind of building on work your institution would already be doing. And then finally, then the sanctuary initiative. So our HEIs becoming safe places, becoming open and welcome places for asylum seekers, refugees, but also migrant communities more broadly. So they're kind of the 5 key areas that are keeping the EDI offices busy at the moment, and our colleagues on access. But then there are some other issues or other themes you might like to consider. The whole issue of age, mature students, for example, socioeconomic barriers to higher ed, class issues, issues in the classroom, and then the whole area of care and family status and so on. So just in terms of some ideas for the projects, and again, as has been emphasised, these can be at institutional level, programme level, departmental level. They're not prescriptive here, but do have to be around the student experience, impacting on the student experience, and really kind of changing culture, I guess, kind of cultural change. So a couple of broad ideas for projects I was thinking of. So you could look at increasing participation of underrepresented groups. So particularly the national access categories, so outreach activities, for example, taster classes. Again, this would build on work that's already probably going on in your institution, particularly with your access units, stipends, etc., for underrepresented groups, if that was a possibility. But then also thinking about retention of underrepresented groups, supporting the students that are there, and how we ensure that our environments and our classrooms are inclusive. I've mentioned already there is a lot of work to do to embed EDI into our curriculums, into our academic programmes, and to ensure that we're up to date. The research here is moving very, very quickly and can go out of date quite quickly. So ensuring that our curricula are inclusive of newer language and this particular space. And then finally then, and I don't really have a project idea for this, but I was just thinking, sometimes there's challenges to discussing EDI in the classroom. They can often be difficult conversations to have, particularly around race. So just thinking around supports maybe for how we manage those conversations and encourage those conversations in a safe way. More broadly, you will, and has been mentioned, the application will ask you to talk about, for certainly staff-led applications, to talk about how you've ensured inclusivity in the application itself and the student partnership. So again, just to be mindful of that. So I'll leave it there, and I might share a couple of links in the chat that will be helpful.
Great, thanks a million, Claire. Some great ideas shared there, and particularly the area of increasing representation of underrepresented groups. It'd be lovely to see some ideas coming through there in applications. So we'll be coming back to the chat in a moment, because I know there's lots of questions that we need to look at. So I'm going to move on to Maureen Harron, who's a lecturer here in ATU and Universal Design for Learning, and she's been leading out on creating the Centre of Excellence for UDL here in ATU. So thanks, Maureen. We'll hand over to you.
Hi, thanks, Karina. Just a couple of the areas I'm going to cover. There's 3 areas in particular. I'll just give a very brief, and I mean a very brief overview of UDL, just for those who are kind of wondering what it is, if you haven't heard of it to date. Where we've gone with UDL and ATU, because we've really led the way nationally on several different programs. I'll talk very briefly on what some of those are, because you might find some connections there as well. And then kind of where we're headed next within the Centre of Excellence, the UDL Centre of Excellence within ATU, because again, there may be connections in what our plans are going forward that maybe you can plug into in your application. So what is UDL? It's based on 3 principles. And it comes from the neurosciences. So you're looking at the principle of engagement, which looks at the effective network of the brain. Looks at multiple means of representation, which looks at the recognition networks of the brain. And then it also looks at multiple means of action expression that engages with the strategic networks of the brain. So this is effectively taps into how people learn and works with the neurosciences. So I'll pop a link in the chat in a few moments coming from the CAST organization, where this all originated. It derived out of Harvard University, out of the work of Dr. David Rose and Ann Meyer. And there's a whole list of guidelines underneath all of those principles. But basically, the engagement, representation, action, and expression, they are scaffolds, really, that we can use within educating students and looking at, recruiting their interest, sustaining their effort and persistence, and engaging with their perception and the way that they can communicate and express how they've learned. And this can be done through multiple means of and multiple platforms in terms of how students can access information, and then how we can also represent our work. So that's, again, very, very brief, but the overall idea or aim is to get students to be able to reach those executive functions and to be able to self-regulate. So where have we gone with UDL and ATU? So we've had local UDL digital badge facilitations. I rolled out the badge in Sligo for several years, and then it was rolled out in with Laura Hegarty in GMIT, then GMIT, and we're now kind of bringing up the Donegal side of the house as well. We've had a lot of interest there. So that was from 2017 to 2020. Then we joined the National Forum facilitation with AHEAD and UCD, which last year had over 1,200 participants, and this year we've come up to close to 2,000 participants. We've worked with the National Forum on UDL funded several different projects and have had great success. I can offer more information on what those are. I'll leave another link in the chat box to a video that our UDL team would have put forward for the John Kelly Award recently that explains those projects in detail. We developed a new Level 9 program. It's the postgraduate certificate in UDL stroke masters. People can go on to complete the masters in year 2, research masters. We established the ATU UDL Center of Excellence, supporting staff within implementing UDL into their programs. And then the PG Cert in Teaching Learning Assessment, we've embedded the digital badge there as well. So this work has been mentioned, and much more has been recognized nationally through the recent John Kelly Collaborative Award in UDL, which ATU walked away with on the day. It was great collaboration that we've put together over the last few years, even kind of pre-merger. We've been working together all along on UDL. So we've progressed it quite a bit. So what's next? The National Access Plan, the Path for funding. ATU is leading on 5 different work packages within the ATU, but we're leading on 4 of these nationally. In particular, I'm leading on the National UDL for 3 charter. So this is a national charter on universal design / universal design for learning, because UD is the built environment and the ICT, and UDL is concentrates more on the curricula. So this is coming together, and we're working alongside the redevelopment of the UCD Inclusive Toolkit, which underpins the work that we're doing under 4 different pillars, which is teaching and learning.
Maureen,
yes.
Sorry, Maureen, I'm going to have to interrupt you. So just conscious of the time that we have to move on. So really the message for people that if you're interested in the UDL aspect, possibly if you're on one of these courses, the PG Cert or the badges, there may be ideas that are coming through from that would be worthy of an application, and thinking how you might partner with students on that. So Maureen, you might add in the chat possible ideas that participants today could consider in relation to the UDL aspect of the projects. Is that okay? Because I need to move on
absolutely.
now to Sharon. Thanks a million. So thank you, Dr. Sharon Flynn, who's our NTUTOR National Coordinator in THEA. So Sharon is going to share with us some ideas and perspectives in relation to student partnership from a project that she's just recently led and come out of from at the IUA. So thanks, Sharon.
Thanks very much, Karina. And can I just say thank you to all our speakers today who've just been fantastic. I'm very conscious of time though, so I won't take up too much of your time. But as Karina pointed out, before I joined NTUTOR, I was involved in a project with the IUA called Enhancing Digital Teaching and Learning. So I just wanted to share a little bit of learning from that. In terms of student interns, over the lifetime of the project, we employed more than 24 student interns who worked with us, some of them based in the IUA with me, but most of them actually embedded in the 7 partner universities. And the students were paid for their work, so they were employed with us for about 60 hours per month, and they were employed interns. it really showed me the value of having a student lens on things, whatever that thing might be. But just to be able to see things through the eyes of a student was what really mattered to the project. So some of the projects that students were involved in, some of their activities were student facing. So that could have been developing resources for other students, being involved in campaigns locally, where the target group was other students. Or indeed, they could be staff facing. So getting student perspectives on what was going on in their lives, how they were, for example, coping with online learning or whatever it might be. Those were both very, very positive aspects. So what I'm not going to say too much more, but what I want to share is a collection of case studies that we put together, which I'm going to just put in the chat just now. And those will give you an idea of some of the things that students were involved in. So, for example, as I mentioned, resources for academic integrity or campaigns for academic integrity on campus was one of the things that was focused on, for example, in Maynooth. In UCD, the student intern partnered with a member of the library team to develop a module, again, for students around exploring digital identity. In Galway, there was a student who worked within the Department of Pharmacology to develop curriculum resources for students. So those are just a couple of examples, and you'll find write-ups on the case studies at that link that I shared. In terms of staff facing, what we found most useful was involving students in training workshops or getting information to staff about how students were experiencing, in particular, for example, the lockdown during COVID. So how did they feel being put into groups on Zoom or in Teams? So those sorts of things, and why students may or may not turn their cameras on or off. All of those were very, very important things to understand from the student perspective. So I'm also just going to share, before Karina cuts me off, a little video which gives the students the opportunity in their own words to talk to us about how they got on with their student partnership activities. And the last thing I want to mention is we also employed a student to do an evaluation of the student partnership scheme. And I'm going to put a little link into the chat now, which refers to the report that was put together, which is available online, which also includes a set of recommendations around having students as partners in teaching and learning. So I hope that's enough, Karina, and thank you very much for letting me speak about my previous project.
No, it's brilliant. And there's so many great resources from your project, Sharon. So thanks a million for sharing. It'll trigger some ideas with our own colleagues and students here in the sector. So thanks a million. So looking at the time, we're doing okay, Maura. We've 9 minutes left. So there's lots of brilliant questions coming through. And maybe I'll just take a moment. We'll just capture those questions. And then I would like for Clodagh McGivern will come in with some commentary here, coming from the student leadership, and also Owen Hicks, if you've just some comments to share while we're just collating the questions together. Clodagh, any comments? How do you feel about what's been said in the panel?
Yeah, no, I think that it's all fantastic. I know the concept of, as mentioned before, students being seen as partners isn't new. You know, we have NSTEP, we have Sparks, which is the Scottish equivalent. So there is great movements being made towards, you know, integrating students as partners in institutions. But in saying that, so there are like several benefits to having students as partners in everything that you're developing. It gives students the opportunity to play an active role in the processes that are directly impacting them. Like we've heard before, you know, students are experts at being students, as they're the ones on the ground experiencing higher education, especially since higher education, you know, continues to change every single year. There's a lot of people who might be staff now that have a completely different experience of higher education as students on the ground do now. We know that the cost of accommodation is a lot more cost of education is a lot more expensive now. But in saying that, there's a lot of people who are coming to higher education as first time graduates, because we have things like the Susie grant that is after, breaking down barriers. There's a lot more diversity. We have, access routes that have been worked on, and, the international students coming in has increased as well. So the landscape and the way the campus is has changed. So it's important that whenever we are having students as partners, that the diversity is reflected in the opinions that are being shared. So I commend all of you on all the work that you're doing as having students as partners in relation to the digital transformation in teaching and learning, education for sustainability, equality, diversity, inclusion, UDL, and academic integrity, which is massive now, as we're hearing a lot about the chatbots and everything, which is kind of terrifying. But I just said that I might list out some of the benefits for staff and students that students as partners can bring about, and hopefully in things in the future we can integrate that in a little bit more. So in relation to students, students as partners has been seen to increase student engagement, their motivation, and the ownership for learning. It has been seen to increase student confidence and self-efficiency. It has increased understanding of how the others experience things, because I know that sometimes we see that staff and students are almost pitted against each other whenever things don't work out. So it's important whenever they collaborate with one another, you can see how the others are viewing things and why things are happening for certain reasons. It can enhance the relationship or trust between students and staff, and in a very positive way. It can introduce a sense of belonging in a university or discipline or a community, and it can also feed into QA, where improvements can be made to content and discipline and stuff like that. And it can engage and empower underrepresented students, which is incredibly important. In relation to staff and faculty, it can, as I said, enhance the relationship or trust. There can be the development of new and or better teaching or curriculum materials, new beliefs about teaching and learning that can change practices. It can reconceptualize teaching as a collaborative process to foster learning, and learning from and with students, including the development of their own digital capabilities, as that is an important dimension of the continuous professional development, which I think was mentioned previously. And in relation to institutions as well, like, it gives students an opportunity to grow their skills. This can support employability and a greater involvement in the teaching and learning experience. We've seen that whenever students are seen as partners in institutions, that it can also aid retention. These days, it is easy enough to get your foot in the door in a higher education institution, but it's about being able to retain the students is the difficult part. And we see that, dropout rates are quite prominent in third year and stuff like that, when people are close to finishing the courses. So whenever we do see them as partners, we can hear them out and we can make any adequate changes to policy and stuff like that to try and keep them around. And in relation to the institutions, it develops and enhance working, learning and assessment. So as I mentioned NSTEP before, I thought that it would be important to kind of drive home the key elements of NSTEP. So there are 4 drivers of student engagement. There's a culture of students as partners, the institution as a site for democratic citizenship, the institution as an inclusive learning community, and a culture of institutional reflection and enhancement. There's also 4 domains of student engagement. So
what we might do, Clodagh, is we'll put that in the chat, because that's really important information. That website is fantastic, that NSTEP website. And we'll pop that in the chat, because that will trigger ideas, because we do want applications to consider and align with the NSTEP and the National Student Engagement Principles. So I'm just conscious, because we've 3 minutes. So thanks a million, Clodagh. And I know Owen, we'll get to you in a moment, Owen, but just maybe we'll just check, Nuala. Have we answered, Nuala and Ken? Are we up to date with the questions? Is there something that needs to be opened up on the floor here?
I have two, if I can go first.
Yeah.
So Niamh Ní Ceallachóir has asked, she wants to run her project with a module that's commencing next year. So does she engage with the students now who are going to be on that project, in that module next year? So should they become part of the project team?
Okay, so she can, what she can do is articulate that within the application, note that the students commence in September. I think name the student group that she's going to partner and collaborate with. There'll be a bit of planning.
She may not have actual names as such.
No, she doesn't need the names at all.
Okay.
So she will just indicate how many. So if it's 10, 20, maybe it's a class. She's engaging the entire class and just indicate the class name and the students and her plan, because these initiatives may start at any stage, but they will conclude and they must complete by next April, May 2024. April 2024, we're gearing up for the national type symposium conference for disseminating the outputs from this initiative. So is that okay?
Thank you. And one other one is, people are wondering, when will they expect an outcome when they put in their application? How soon will they get a response in terms of whether it's successful or not?
If everything goes ahead, we're for the closing date, we are planning, the closing date is the 30th. There's evaluations planned for mid-February. We expect a quick turnaround on this, and we expect that recipients of the award will know by the first week in March. So that's the plan. That's what we're aiming for. But we will communicate through the Thea NTUTOR website on those timelines. Moira, did you want to come in there?
Just very quickly on student stipends, I've seen a good few questions coming up on those. We do have, I suppose, institutions often locally have guidance. So the key thing is to check with your local team and your local payroll, your local HR, to check on what is needed locally. And if there are further questions then or guidance needed, we can share that within the NTUTOR team.
Yeah. Is there any other questions, Nuala or Ken?
Yeah, there's quite a few questions just around who the leads were. So I've posted in a list of the leads that have been appointed to date and some of the other key people. And lots of questions around whether it's just for undergraduate students. So we've even had a PhD, somebody asked was it eligible for PhD candidates. Yeah. So we've said that it's eligible for all students. So
absolutely open to all. So that's fantastic. And then I'm just thinking, we have just one other thing. If people can hang on, we'll just, to close off, we've two other items. Owen, if you have some commentary there, or you'd like to come in relation to add to Clodagh's comments on student partnership, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, I'll do my best to be very quick. I also have to run on after this as well. I do apologise that we've kept.
That's okay. I'm sorry we've overran.
Sure, listen, it happens to the best of us. I do agree with everything that Clodagh said, but I just wanted to raise the point that we need to recognise and notice just how selfless some of these projects are, because the majority of students that are putting forward ideas are doing it for the betterment of the community, the campus and the group. Even if it is only an individual student putting forward a project, it's something that benefits staff and students, which I think is phenomenal. And I appreciate that obviously the money is a finite resource and it can't go to everyone, but I just found it amazing to see how many students are looking to do phenomenal things within their course and within their campus because they appreciate how necessary they are. I really think that the student partnership with staff is something that we should strive for, because obviously at the end of the day, it's students that are going to be in the college for the next 4, 5, 6 years of their life, depending on what they do. And having these resources and these goals that we need to set now is such an important thing, because obviously you're in college to make the most of your time to get a good education. But at the same time, you want to leave something behind you that lasts for other students, so you're leaving a lasting and beneficial impression on the college and the community around it. As Clodagh will no doubt tell you later, USI does phenomenal work across all campuses, but that's a national thing. We want to push for students to be doing it themselves as well, because it's great when we have organisations and unions like the SU I'm in at the moment, but it's also just a great idea to remind the students that they can do this on their own, that they don't need to have an army or a committee with them, that a good idea that they put forward and push for themselves can lead into positive and beneficial change that lasts. And I think that's such an important thing that we're pushing for with NTUTOR. And it's honestly, phenomenal to be here and to be hearing all the other ideas and questions that have been asked today.
Brilliant. Thanks, Owen. Fantastic points made there. Brilliant. And thank you, Clodagh, as well, for your input. So we're just going to finish off. There's one last piece we want to show you, okay? And it's important in relation to when you submit your application. And at the end, you're asked a piece around, it's an EDI confirmation piece. And I think Claire is going to speak to us about that to explain why this piece is in there. Moira, should we show it up on the screen? The EDI, the EDI monitoring piece. And just to ensure that everybody completes this when you do complete your application form, please. Claire, I was going to ask you to talk about that for 1 minute.
I mean, I suppose there's two reasonings really. I mean, firstly, Europe, given it's a European funded project, and Europe is very, very big on EDI and EDI monitoring and mainstreaming. I guess it's a funding requirement as much as anything else. But actually, it's really important, for a project that is around EDI, trying to ensure inclusivity. It's really important we have a way to measure that and to monitor that, like we're all doing with our own Athena Swan submissions and so on in our own institutions. So depending on what form you fill in, if an individual student submits a form, they will get back this EDI monitoring form, a very short form. It's anonymous. It'll be held centrally. It is voluntary self-disclosure, and it will just ask students whether or not they are identify themselves as members of underrepresented groups of students, essentially in the National Access Plan. And I forget, Karina and Moira, do we ask gender there? We've already asked them gender in the main application.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
I actually don't have the final form here. I'm just going to
I think Sharon has it actually. Yeah.
We do ask them again.
Yeah.
We do ask again.
So we're asking gender, and again, I should have said at the start, when we think of gender, there are, of course, third gender options. Non-binary students, of course, can identify that way too, and that's important. And then, as I said, it's asking whether or not the students are in underrepresented groups. We're not asking for evidence of this or anything. It's all self-disclosure. And then for team applications, whoever is the lead will get this form back and will be asked to send that out to the students' groups. So again, it's all about monitoring, and it's all anonymized and aggregated. And I think that's probably, don't have anything else really, Karina or Moira or Sharon.
That's great. We just wanted to put a spotlight on it just to ensure, and the value, and as to why we're doing it and why it's so important to the project. And then finally, just to wrap up, some of you asked questions around the assessment piece and the evaluation. There is a rubric, there is an assessment rubric that will be followed by the evaluation team. The evaluation team is made up of members from all of the partners in this project, which is all of the technological universities, the 5 and the 2 institutes of technology, and there will be student representation on that evaluation panel as well. So the assessment rubric, which is in the NTUTOR TIA webpage that's been shared, that will be the rubric that will be followed, and that rubric aligns with the questions that have been asked in the application form. So, and I think Moira has it brought up, so thanks, Moira. Just so people are aware. So if you need a prompt or a guide in relation to the material that you're completing on your application form, do have a look at the rubric before you submit to check that you have the various details covered. You'll see the scoring against all of those criteria. So listen, I'd like to say thanks very much. If there's any final questions, Nuala, Ken, do we need to maybe answer anything, and at least it will go into the recording?
It was when Ken mentioned about students being eligible, there was a question about staff eligibility, and I just confirmed that professional support staff and academic staff are eligible. Anyone who supports student learning is eligible. And there's just one question there from Anya Daly, just in terms of can she contact people who are on the panel? I think maybe contact your NTUTOR lead or pop an email if you don't get an answer there to one of us, and we'll try and assist you.
Absolutely.
That's all from me.
Okay, thanks a million, Nuala. And Ken, any final questions, or we're covered?
Yeah, no, one question that did come up was the chat going to, well, number one, was there going to be a recording available? So the answer is yes. And the second one was there going to be the chat, or is that going to be made available afterwards?
Yeah,
so
we will pull down the chat, and
yeah.
There's an app, a tool that we can do that, and we'll make a copy of that. So we just need to edit this recording. We'll package up the chat, and we will make it available on our local SharePoint site, but also on the TIA NTUTOR webpage. Is that okay, Sharon? We'll do that. Just a video link, and of course because there's been amazing commentary and lots of questions answered in the chat, so we need to capture that, make sure everybody gets that. Okay, I think Sinead, I think we've covered it all. Definitely one thing we need to do, it's an action, we need to have a Word document of that form, so we'll make sure we get that put up over the next couple of days. So I'd like to say a huge thank you to our panel. Thank you again, Mark, Fiona, Garoj, Claire, Maureen and Sharon, and also to Clodagh and Owen. Thank you so much for your insights. Thank you so much, Nuala and Ken, for doing an amazing job moderating it all. And thank you, partner Moira, in all of this. So thanks a million, Moira. And I don't think I've left anybody out. I hope not. And Jamie, who's joined us as well from the ATU. So thank you. And thank you to all of you. This is amazing to see the engagement. We 350 people signed up for this webinar for lunchtime. So lots of people interested. It's wonderful to see all the engagement happening with staff and with students across the sector. So we're looking forward to lots of transformation over the next year in the sector. So thanks very much, everybody, and good luck with your applications.